A scorching Arizona town. A man who loses everything in a poker game, including his freedom. His punishment? Marriage to a woman no one sees. But when outlaws come calling and bullets fly, the quiet bride reveals a truth that will shake Redstone Hollow to its core. This is a story of pride, steel, and the kind of love that's forged in fire. Stay with me until the very end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. The Arizona sun didn't forgive mistakes, and Jack Wilder had made his biggest one yet. He stood in the center of Redstone Hollow's main street, hatless and hollow-eyed, staring at the woman he was about to marry. Eliza Moore, the shopkeeper's daughter. The girl who swept floors and restocked shelves and never once looked anyone in the eye. She wore a plain gray dress that hung loose on her thin frame, and her hands were clasped so tight her knuckles had gone white. She wouldn't look at him either. Behind them, the whole town had gathered, miners with dust still on their boots, shopkeepers who'd closed early just to watch, women in their Sunday best fanning themselves against the heat and whispering behind gloved hands. They were all waiting for the same thing, to see Jack Wilder brought low. And brought low he was. 24 hours ago, he'd been sitting pretty. 3 aces in his hand, a pile of cash in the center of the table, and enough whiskey in his blood to make him feel invincible. He'd been playing cards at the Silver Dollar Saloon since sundown, winning hand after hand until Dutch Kellerman sat down across from him. Dutch was a cattleman with more money than sense and a mean streak that ran deep. He'd lost 4 hands in a row, and his temper was showing. "One more," Dutch had said, sliding a deed across the table. "My ranch against everything you got." Jack should have walked away, should have taken his winnings and disappeared into the night like he always did. But the whiskey was talking louder than his common sense, and the crowd was watching, and Jack Wilder had never backed down from a bet in his life. "Deal," he'd said. He lost. Not just the hand, everything. His horse, his guns, his cash, even the gold watch his father had given him before he died. Dutch swept it all into a leather bag with a grin that showed too many teeth. But he wasn't done yet. "Not enough," Dutch said, leaning back in his chair. "Man bets his whole life. He ought to pay with his whole life." The saloon had gone quiet. Jack felt the whiskey haze start to lift, felt the first cold prickle of fear run down his spine. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you got no horse, no money, no way out of this town. You're a card sharp and a drifter, Wilder, and we all know it, so here's what's going to happen." Dutch looked around the room, making sure everyone was listening. "You're going to marry Eliza Moore. You're going to settle down, work honest, and prove to this town you're more than a cheat and a coward. You do that for 1 year, and I'll give you back half of what you lost. You run, and I'll make sure every lawman from here to California knows your name." The room erupted. Some men laughed. Others nodded like it was the most reasonable thing they'd ever heard. A few women gasped, though whether it was for Jack or Eliza, he couldn't tell. Jack had tried to argue, tried to say it wasn't legal, wasn't right, wasn't any man's business to force another into marriage. But Sheriff Hodge had stepped forward, arms crossed over his barrel chest, and said Dutch was within his rights. Jack had made the bet. Jack had lost. And if Jack wanted to keep breathing free air instead of rotting in a cell for card cheating, a charge Hodge could make stick any time he wanted, then Jack would honor the terms. So here he stood, in the middle of the street, about to marry a woman he'd never spoken to. Pastor Green cleared his throat. He was a thin man with a gray beard and eyes that held no sympathy. He opened his Bible and began to read, his voice carrying over the murmur of the crowd. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Jack barely heard the words. He was too busy trying not to look at the faces around him. Dutch Kellerman stood front and center, arms crossed, satisfaction radiating off him like heat from a stove. Beside him was Mary Callahan, the saloon owner, who'd always had a soft spot for Jack, until last night. Now she just looked disgusted. There was Samuel Brooks, the blacksmith, shaking his head like he'd expected this all along. And there, near the back, was Eliza's father. Harold Moore was a slight man with stooped shoulders and hands stained black from years of handling newsprint and ink. He owned the general store, sold everything from flour to fabric, and rarely said more than 3 words to anyone. He was watching his daughter with an expression Jack couldn't quite read. Resignation, maybe, or relief. Eliza had been 19 years old for 6 months now, well past marrying age by frontier standards, and no man had ever come calling. Jack didn't know why. He'd never paid her any attention. She was just part of the background, like the wooden sidewalks or the water trough, always there, never noticed. But people noticed her now. "Do you, Jack Wilder, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Jack's throat was dry. He wanted to say no, wanted to tell them all to go to hell, to take their judgment and their smug faces and choke on them, but he'd run out of choices the moment he laid down his cards. "I do." The words tasted like ash. "And do you, Eliza Moore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" There was a long pause. Jack finally looked at her. Really looked at her. Eliza's face was pale, her features small and unremarkable. Brown hair pulled back into a tight bun. Hazel eyes fixed somewhere past his shoulder. She didn't look afraid exactly. She looked empty. Like she'd already accepted whatever was coming and had nothing left to give. "I do," she whispered. Pastor Green nodded. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona, I pronounce you man and wife." He snapped the Bible shut. "You may kiss your bride." Jack didn't move. Neither did Eliza. The crowd began to laugh. Not loud, not cruel, just that low, satisfied chuckle of people watching a train wreck they'd seen coming from miles away. Dutch stepped forward and clapped Jack on the shoulder, hard enough to make him stumble. "Congratulations, Wilder. Welcome to the rest of your life." But the house was small. One room, really, with a fireplace on one end and a narrow bed on the other. There was a table, 2 chairs, and a shelf that held a few tin plates and cups. The floor was dirt, packed hard from years of use. A single window looked out onto the scrubland behind the house, where nothing grew but sagebrush and despair. Harold Moore had signed the property over to them that afternoon. It had belonged to his late wife's brother, a prospector who'd died of fever 3 years back. It had sat empty ever since. Now it was theirs. Jack stood in the center of the room, hands in his pockets, and tried not to think about how fast his life had collapsed. Eliza moved past him without a word. She set a small cloth bag on the table, her belongings, he assumed, and began unpacking. A hairbrush, a change of clothes, a tin cup, a small leather-bound book. She arranged them neatly on the shelf, her movements precise and careful. Jack watched her. She still hadn't looked at him. "You don't have to do this," he said finally. She paused, her hand hovering over the shelf. Then she continued arranging her things. "I mean it," Jack said, his voice harder now. "This whole thing, it's a joke, a punishment. You know that, right? You don't actually have to stay married to me." Eliza turned to face him. Her expression was calm, unreadable. "Where would I go?" Jack blinked. "What? If I don't stay here, where would I go?" Her voice was soft, almost emotionless. "Back to my father's house? Back to sweeping floors and waiting for customers who look right through me?" She shook her head. "At least here, I'm somebody's wife. At least here, I have a reason to exist." The words hit Jack like a slap. He'd been so focused on his own humiliation, his own loss, that he hadn't considered hers. This wasn't just a punishment for him. It was her last chance at a life that mattered. "I didn't ask for this," he said quietly. "Neither did I." Eliza turned back to the shelf. "But here we are, sat." The first 3 days passed in silence. Jack slept on the floor near the fireplace, using his coat as a blanket. Eliza took the bed without comment. They moved around each other like ghosts, careful not to touch, careful not to speak. She cooked simple meals, beans, cornbread, coffee, and left his portion on the table. He ate without tasting it. During the day, Jack wandered the town. He had no money, no horse, no purpose. Dutch had made good on his word and spread the story far and wide. Everywhere Jack went, people stared. Some smirked. Others just shook their heads. He tried to find work. The blacksmith turned him away. The saloon wouldn't hire him. Even the livery stable owner, a man who'd lost 3 fingers in a threshing accident and had never turned anyone away, told Jack he had nothing for him. "You made your bed, Wilder," the man said, not unkindly. Now you got a lie in it. By the fourth day, Jack was ready to explode. He came home that evening to find Eliza outside, kneeling in the dirt beside the house. She'd cleared a patch of ground and was arranging stones in a neat rectangle. Inside the rectangle, she'd planted something, seeds maybe, though Jack couldn't tell what. "What are you doing?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Making a garden." "A garden?" Jack laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "You think anything's going to grow out here?" "I don't know," Eliza said calmly, "but I'm going to try." Something in Jack snapped. "This is a waste of time," he said, his voice rising. "You think planting a few seeds is going to change anything? You think it's going to make this place less of a prison?" Eliza finally looked up at him. Her expression was still calm, but there was something in her eyes now, something hard. "No," she said quietly, "but it's better than doing nothing." Jack clenched his fists. He wanted to yell, to kick over the stones, to destroy the neat little rectangle she'd made. He wanted to burn the whole damn house down and walk away from this life that had been forced on him. But he didn't. Instead, he turned and walked back inside, slamming the door behind him. The next morning, Jack woke to the smell of coffee and found Eliza already dressed, sitting at the table with her hands wrapped around a tin cup. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept. "I'm going to the store," she said. "We need flour and salt." Jack sat up, rubbing his face. "You got money?" "My father gave me a little." "It won't last long." Jack felt a flicker of shame. He was the man. He was supposed to provide, but he had nothing to give. "I'll find work," he said, though the words felt hollow. Eliza nodded. She stood, picked up a small basket, and walked to the door. Then she paused, her hand on the latch. "Jack." It was the first time she'd said his name. He looked up. "If you're going to leave," she said quietly, "do it now, before I start hoping you'll stay." She left before he could respond. Jack sat alone in the empty house, the weight of her words pressing down on him like stones. "Watson." He didn't leave. He told himself it was because he had nowhere to go. No horse, no money, no friends willing to help. He told himself it was because Dutch would make good on his threat, and Jack wasn't ready to spend the rest of his life running from the law. But deep down, he knew the truth. He didn't leave because leaving would prove everyone right. It would prove he was a coward and a cheat and a man without honor. And despite everything, despite the humiliation and the anger and the suffocating weight of this unwanted life, Jack Wilder still had a shred of pride left. So he stayed. And slowly, grudgingly, he started to try. He found work at the lumber yard, hauling timber for 50 cents a day. It was brutal, back-breaking labor that left his hands blistered and his muscles screaming, but it was honest. At the end of each week, he handed Eliza the money without comment, and she used it to buy flour, salt, beans, and a few other small necessities. She never thanked him. She didn't need to. The small changes around the house spoke for her. A new blanket on the bed, curtains on the window, a pot of wildflowers on the table that she'd picked from somewhere out in the scrubland, and the garden. Despite everything, despite the heat and the hard soil and Jack's conviction that nothing could grow in this godforsaken place, the garden began to show signs of life. Tiny green shoots pushed up through the dirt, fragile and determined. Eliza tended them every morning, watering them from a bucket she filled at the town well. Jack watched her sometimes, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed, and wondered what she was thinking. She never smiled, never spoke unless she had to. But there was something in the way she touched those plants, gently, carefully, like they were precious, that made Jack's chest tighten with something he couldn't name. 3 weeks into the marriage, Dutch Kellerman showed up at their door. Jack was outside chopping wood when he saw the cattlemen riding up the path, flanked by 2 of his ranch hands. Jack set down the axe and waited, his jaw tight. Dutch dismounted with a grin that made Jack want to hit him. "Wilder," Dutch said, tipping his hat. "Thought I'd come check on you, see how married life's treating you." "Fine," Jack said flatly. Dutch looked past him at the house, at the small garden beside it, at Eliza standing in the doorway with her arms crossed. His grin widened. "Well, I'll be damned. Looks like you're actually trying." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Bet it's killing you, isn't it? Playing house with a woman you don't want? Knowing the whole town's watching, waiting for you to fail. Jack's fists clenched. What do you want, Dutch? Just wanted to remind you of our deal, Dutch said, his tone light but his eyes cold. 1 year, Wilder. You make it 1 year without running, and I'll give you back half of what you lost. But if you leave, if you so much as think about leaving, I'll make sure every lawman in the territory knows what you are. You'll spend the rest of your life in a cage or swinging from a rope. He stepped back, his grin returning. Enjoy your new life. Dutch and his men rode off, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Jack stood there, his heart pounding, his hands shaking with rage. He wanted to chase after Dutch, to drag him off his horse and beat that smug grin off his face, but he knew it would only make things worse. He turned and found Eliza still standing in the doorway, watching him. He's a bastard, Jack said, his voice rough. Eliza nodded. Yes, he is. She turned and went back inside. Jack followed her, slamming the door behind him. He paced the small room like a caged animal, his mind racing. This is unbearable, he said. I can't. He stopped, running his hands through his hair. I can't do this for a year. I can't pretend to be someone I'm not. I can't. Then stop pretending. Jack turned to face her. Eliza was standing by the table, her arms at her sides, her expression as calm as ever. What? Stop pretending, she said again. You're not pretending to be a good man, Jack. You're trying to convince yourself you're still a bad one. Jack stared at her, stunned. You work every day, Eliza continued, her voice steady. You bring home money. You haven't drunk yourself into a stupor or gambled away what little we have. You chop wood, you fix the roof, you do what needs to be done. That's not pretending. That's just living. I didn't choose this life, Jack said, his voice low and dangerous. Neither did I, Eliza said. But it's the life we have, and I'm tired of watching you sulk about it. For a moment, Jack couldn't speak. He'd expected her to be meek, to accept his anger without protest. But there was steel in her voice now, a sharpness he hadn't seen before. You think this is easy for me? Eliza continued, her voice rising slightly. You think I wanted to marry a man who hates me? Who looks at me like I'm the source of all his problems? She shook her head. I didn't ask for this either, Jack. But I'm here and I'm trying, so either help me or leave. But stop acting like you're the only one suffering. Jack felt something crack inside him. Not anger, something deeper, something that felt almost like shame. He looked at Eliza, really looked at her, and for the first time he saw her. Not as a punishment or a burden, but as a person, a woman who'd been invisible her whole life, who'd been handed to him like a consolation prize, and who was still trying to make something out of nothing. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Eliza blinked, as if she hadn't expected that. I don't hate you, Jack continued, the words coming slowly. I hate this. I hate what Dutch did. What Dutch? I hate that I'm trapped, but I don't hate you. Eliza's expression softened, just a little. Then stop taking it out on me. Jack nodded. I'll try. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The weeks that followed were different. Not easy, not comfortable, but different. Jack still worked at the lumberyard, but he stopped coming home angry. He spoke to Eliza at meals, asking simple questions about her day, about the garden, about what she needed. She answered in short, careful sentences, but she answered. They started eating together instead of in silence. They started sitting outside in the evenings, watching the sun set over the scrubland. They didn't say much, but the quiet between them felt less heavy. One night, Jack came home to find Eliza at the table, hunched over her small, leather-bound book. He'd never asked what it was, but now he was curious. What are you reading? He asked. Eliza looked up, surprised. It's not a book, it's a journal. You write? She nodded. Not stories, just thoughts. Things I notice. Jack pulled out the other chair and sat down. Can I hear one? Eliza hesitated, then opened the journal and read aloud. The sky here is bigger than anywhere I've ever been. It's so wide and so empty that sometimes I feel like I could disappear into it. But I don't think I would mind. I think it might be peaceful. She closed the journal, her cheeks flushed. Jack didn't know what to say. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made his chest ache. That's good, he said finally. Eliza smiled, just a small, fleeting thing, but it was the first time Jack had seen it, and something inside him shifted. By the time the first month ended, Jack had stopped counting the days until he could leave. He still didn't love this life. Didn't love the small house or the hard work or the weight of everyone's judgment, but he'd stopped resenting it quite so much. And he'd stopped resenting Eliza. She was stronger than he'd thought, quieter, yes, but not weak. She endured the whispers and the stares without flinching. She worked every day without complaint. And she'd built a small, fragile garden in a place where nothing should have been able to grow. Jack didn't know if he'd ever be able to call her his wife in anything more than name, but he was starting to think that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to hate her for being part of this. One evening, as they sat outside watching the stars, Jack spoke without thinking. "Your garden's doing well." Eliza glanced at him, then at the small rectangle of green beside the house. "It is. I didn't think anything would grow." "Neither did I." She smiled again, that small, fleeting thing. But it did. Jack looked at her, at the quiet determination in her face, and felt something stir in his chest. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of something that might one day look like it. The garden wasn't the only thing growing. By the second month, something had shifted between them, small and tentative, like the first shoots pushing through hard soil. Jack found himself noticing things about Eliza he'd never paid attention to before. The way she tilted her head when she was thinking. The careful precision of her hands as she mended his torn shirt. The fact that she hummed sometimes when she thought no one was listening. A low, tuneless sound that somehow made the house feel less empty. He noticed, too, that she was watching him. Not with fear or resentment, but with something else. Curiosity, maybe. As if she was trying to figure out who he really was beneath the reputation. One Saturday evening, Jack came home from the lumber yard to find the house transformed. Eliza had swept the floor until the packed dirt gleamed. She'd hung wildflowers from the rafters, filling the air with a sweet, grassy scent. And on the table sat a meal that was more than beans and cornbread, roasted chicken, potatoes, even a small pie made from wild berries. Jack stopped in the doorway, staring. "What's all this?" Eliza looked up from the stove, her cheeks flushed from the heat. "We've been married 2 months today. I thought we should mark it somehow." Jack didn't know what to say. He'd lost track of the days, stopped counting them like a prisoner marking time on a cell wall, but she'd remembered. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "I know." Eliza wiped her hands on her apron. "But I wanted to." They sat down across from each other, and for the first time since that humiliating day in the street, Jack felt something other than anger or resignation. He felt grateful. "This is good," he said after the first bite of chicken. "Really good." Eliza's smile was small but genuine. "My mother taught me, before she died." It was the first time she'd mentioned her mother. Jack set down his fork, studying her face. "How old were you?" 12. Eliza's voice was steady, but her eyes had gone distant. "Fever took her in 3 days. After that, it was just me and my father. He didn't know what to do with a daughter, so I learned to make myself useful. Cooking, cleaning, keeping the books for the store." She paused. "I think he was relieved when Dutch made that bet. One less responsibility." Jack felt anger flare in his chest. Not at her, but at Harold Moore, at Dutch, at everyone who treated her like something to be managed rather than cherished. "He's a fool," Jack said. Eliza looked up, surprised. "Your father," Jack continued. "He's a fool for not seeing what he had." For a moment, Eliza just stared at him. Then her eyes brightened with something that might have been tears, though she blinked them away before they could fall. "Thank you," she whispered. They finished the meal in comfortable silence, and when Jack helped her clear the table, something he'd never done before, Eliza's fingers brushed against his. Neither of them pulled away. That night, for the first time since they'd married, Jack didn't sleep on the floor by the fireplace. He spread his bedroll on the opposite side of the room, closer to where Eliza lay in the narrow bed. It wasn't much, but it was something. And in the darkness, Jack heard her whisper, "Good night, Jack." "Good night, Eliza," he replied. It was the first time they'd said those words to each other. But peace in Redstone Hollow was as fragile as desert glass. The next morning, Jack was walking through town when he heard his name shouted from across the street. He turned to see Billy Crow, one of Dutch's ranch hands, leaning against the hitching post outside the Silver Dollar Saloon. Billy was young, barely 20, with a mean streak that came from trying to prove himself to men who'd never respect him. "Hey, Wilder!" Billy called, his voice loud enough to draw attention. "How's married life treating you? You tamed that quiet little mouse yet, or is she still too scared to look you in the eye?" A few men nearby laughed. Jack felt his jaw tighten, but he kept walking. "What's the matter?" Billy pushed off the post and sauntered into the street. "Too good to talk to us now that you're a respectable married man?" Jack stopped. He turned slowly to face Billy, his hands loose at his sides. "I got no quarrel with you, Billy." "Maybe I got one with you." Billy's hand drifted toward the gun on his hip. "See, Dutch told us what you are. A card sharp. A cheat. The kind of man who'd sell his own soul if the price was right. And now you're walking around here like you deserve respect." Jack took a step forward. "You want to call me out, Billy? You think you're fast enough?" The street went quiet. Men stopped what they were doing to watch. This was what they'd been waiting for, proof that Jack Wilder was still the dangerous man they remembered. But Billy hesitated. Despite his bravado, he wasn't stupid. He'd seen Jack draw before, seen him put 2 bullets through a silver dollar from 20 paces without blinking. "Thought so," Jack said quietly. He turned his back on Billy and walked away. Behind him, he heard Billy spit in the dust. "You're nothing but Dutch's dog now, Wilder, and everyone knows it." Jack didn't respond, but the words followed him all the way home. Eliza was in the garden when he arrived, kneeling in the dirt with a trowel in her hand. She looked up as he approached, and whatever she saw in his face made her set down the tool. "What happened?" Jack shook his head. "Nothing." "Jack." He looked at her, and the concern in her eyes broke something loose inside him. "Billy Crow ran his mouth," Jack said. "Called me Dutch's dog. Said I'm not worth the air I breathe." He laughed bitterly. "And the hell of it is, he's right. I am Dutch's dog. I'm here because he put a leash on me, and I don't have the guts to slip it." Eliza stood, brushing the dirt from her skirt. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Jack's voice rose. "I stay because I'm afraid of what'll happen if I leave. I work because I have to, not because I want to. I sleep in this house and sit at that table and pretend like this is a life, but it's not. It's a prison sentence." Eliza flinched as if he'd struck her. Jack saw the hurt flash across her face and felt immediate regret, but the anger was too strong to swallow back. "I'm sorry," he said roughly. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." Eliza's voice was quiet but steady. "You meant every word." She turned and walked past him into the house, leaving Jack standing alone in the dust. He gave her space for the rest of the day. He chopped wood until his shoulders ached, hauled water from the well, repaired a loose board on the porch. Anything to keep his hands busy and his mind from circling back to the look on her face. By the time the sun set, his anger had burned itself out, leaving only ash and shame. He found Eliza sitting at the table, her journal open in front of her. She didn't look up when he came in. "I shouldn't have said what I said," Jack began. Eliza's pen kept moving across the page. "But you did." "I was angry. Billy got under my skin and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair." "No," Eliza said, finally looking up. "It wasn't." Jack pulled out the other chair and sat down heavily. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be the kind of man you need me to be." "I don't need you to be anything," Eliza said. "I just need you to decide if you're staying or leaving, because I can't keep living with someone who's only here in body." Jack met her eyes. There was no anger in them, no accusation, just a quiet sadness that cut deeper than any insult Billy Crow could have thrown. "I'm staying," Jack said. "Are you?" Eliza closed her journal. "Or are you just counting the days until you can leave with a clear conscience?" Jack didn't have an answer for that, because the truth was, he didn't know. He was still trapped between the life he'd lost and the life he'd been forced into, unable to fully let go of one or commit to the other. Eliza stood. "When you figure it out, let me know." She went to bed without another word, and Jack sat alone at the table, staring at the flame of the oil lamp until it burned low. The next morning, Dutch Kellerman rode into town with news that changed everything. Jack was at the lumberyard when he heard the commotion. Men were gathering in the street, talking in low, urgent voices. Jack set down the timber he'd been carrying and walked over. "What's going on?" Samuel Brooks, the blacksmith, turned to him. "Outlaws. Dutch says they hit his ranch last night, stole 20 head of cattle and shot 2 of his men." Jack felt his blood run cold. "Anyone killed?" "No, but one of them's in bad shape. Doc's with him now." Samuel wiped sweat from his brow. "Sheriff's putting together a posse. They're riding out within the hour." Jack's first instinct was to volunteer. He'd ridden with posses before, back when he was younger and hungrier for the kind of excitement that came with danger. But then he thought of Eliza, waiting at home, and hesitated. "You coming?" Samuel asked. Jack shook his head. "I got obligations." Samuel raised an eyebrow but didn't press. He walked away, leaving Jack standing in the street with the knowledge that everyone would call him a coward for staying behind. But when Jack got home that afternoon, he found Eliza in the garden again, and the sight of her, small and determined, coaxing life from barren ground, made him realize something important. This was his obligation, not the posse, not Dutch Kellerman or Billy Crow or anyone else who thought they had a claim on him. Eliza looked up as he approached. "You're home early." "There's trouble," Jack said. "Outlaws hit Dutch's ranch. The sheriff's organizing a posse." Eliza's face went pale. "Are you going?" Jack shook his head. "No." She stared at him, searching his face for the truth. "Why not?" "Because my place is here." The words came easier than he'd expected. "With you." For a long moment, Eliza didn't move. Then she stood and crossed the distance between them, stopping just inches away. She was so close Jack could see the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes, could smell the faint scent of sage on her skin. "You mean that?" she asked softly. "I do." Eliza reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were rough from work, her grip firm and steady. "Then we'll face whatever comes," she said. "Together." Jack squeezed her hand, and for the first time since that humiliating day in the street, he felt like he'd made the right choice. But the trouble didn't stay at Dutch's ranch. 3 days later, just after sunset, 5 men rode into Redstone Hollow. They came from the east, their horses lathered with sweat, their faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats and bandanas. They tied their mounts outside the Silver Dollar Saloon and went inside, and within minutes, Mary Callahan came running out into the street, her face white with fear. "Someone get the sheriff!" she screamed. "They're looking for Jack Wilder!" Jack was at home when word reached him. A boy from town came running up the path, out of breath and wide-eyed. "Mr. Wilder, there's men at the saloon asking for you. Bad men. They got guns, and they're saying they won't leave until you come talk to them." Jack felt ice settle in his gut. He'd known this day might come, knew that his past, the card games, the cons, the men he'd crossed, would eventually catch up to him, but he'd hoped for more time. "Stay here," he told the boy. Then he turned to Eliza, who'd come to stand in the doorway. "I have to go," he said. Eliza's face was calm, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the doorframe. "Who are they?" "I don't know, but they're not here to talk." Jack went inside and retrieved his gun belt from where it hung on a peg by the door. He hadn't worn it in months, hadn't needed to, but he strapped it on now, checking the cylinder out of habit. When he turned back, Eliza was standing behind him, holding her father's old rifle. "What are you doing?" Jack asked. "Coming with you." "No." Jack's voice was firm. "You stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." Eliza lifted her chin. "I'm not letting you go alone." "Eliza." "Jack." She stepped closer, her eyes fierce. "I'm your wife. That means when you face danger, I face it too." Jack wanted to argue, wanted to tell her to stay safe, to let him handle this. But the determination in her eyes told him he'd lose that fight. "Can you shoot that thing?" he asked. "My father taught me." Eliza's voice was steady. "I can shoot." Jack studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. Stay behind me, and don't fire unless I tell you to. They walked down the path toward town together, the setting sun painting the desert in shades of orange and red. Jack's heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. Beside him, Eliza moved with quiet purpose, the rifle held loosely in her hands. By the time they reached the main street, a crowd had gathered. Men, women, children, all keeping a safe distance from the saloon, watching with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. Sheriff Hodge was there, standing in the middle of the street with his shotgun cradled in his arms. He looked relieved when he saw Jack. "Wilder, thank God. Maybe you can talk some sense into these boys." "What do they want?" Jack asked. "You." Hodge nodded toward the saloon. "They're saying you cheated one of them in a card game 6 months back. Took everything he had, now they want it back plus interest." Jack's jaw tightened. 6 months ago, he'd been in Tombstone. He'd played cards with a lot of men, taken a lot of money. He couldn't remember all their faces. "And if I don't pay?" Hodge's expression darkened. "Then they're going to take it out of your hide." Jack looked at the saloon. Through the window, he could see shadows moving. 5 men, the boy had said. 5 guns against 1. He was calculating the odds when Eliza spoke. "How much do they want?" Hodge blinked at her, as if noticing her for the first time. $200. Eliza's face went pale. It was more money than they'd see in 6 months. More money than they had. "We'll get it," she said. "Eliza, no!" Jack began, but she was already walking toward the saloon, the rifle still in her hands. "Eliza, stop!" Jack caught her arm, pulling her back. "You can't go in there." She turned to face him, and there was something in her eyes Jack had never seen before. Not fear, not uncertainty, but a fierce, unyielding resolve. "Watch me," she said. And before Jack could stop her, Eliza Moore walked through the doors of the Silver Dollar Saloon. Toltid. Jack's heart stopped. For a single frozen moment, he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then he was running, pushing through the doors behind her, his hand on his gun. Inside, the saloon had gone silent. The 5 men sat at a table near the bar, cards and whiskey bottles spread out in front of them. They were hard-looking men, weathered by years of living rough. The one in the center was older than the others, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw and eyes that held no mercy. They all turned to look at Eliza as she walked in. Then they saw Jack behind her, and the scarred man smiled. "Well, well, Jack Wilder. Been a long time." Jack stepped around Eliza, putting himself between her and the outlaws. "I know you?" "You should." The scarred man leaned back in his chair. "Name's Cutter Kane. You cleaned me out in Tombstone 6 months back. Took my horse, my guns, and every dollar I had to my name." Jack's memory clicked. He remembered now, a cold night, a hot streak, a man who kept betting even after his luck had run dry. "That was a fair game," Jack said. "Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't." Cutter shrugged. "Don't much matter now. What matters is you got something that belongs to me, and I want it back." "I don't have it," Jack said flatly. "I lost everything I owned in a poker game myself. You want your money, you'll have to talk to Dutch Kellerman." Cutter's smile widened. "Already did. Dutch says you're his problem now, not his. Says if I want satisfaction, I should take it up with you." He stood, his hand resting on the butt of his gun. "So here I am, taking it up with you." Jack's mind raced. 5 against 1. Even if he drew first, even if he was faster than Cutter, there was no way he'd get all 5 before they cut him down. And then Eliza spoke. "How much?" Cutter turned to look at her, his expression mocking. "You the wife?" "I am." Eliza's voice was steady. "How much do you want?" $200, plus another 50 for my trouble." Eliza lifted the rifle, not pointing it at anyone, but making sure they all saw it. "And if we can't pay?" Cutter's smile faded. "Then your husband's gonna bleed for every dollar he owes me." Jack saw Eliza's jaw tighten, saw her fingers shift on the rifle stock. "We'll get your money," she said, "but not today. We need time." Cutter laughed. "Time? Lady, I don't—" "1 month," Eliza interrupted. "Give us 1 month, and we'll have every dollar. You have my word." "Your word?" Cutter looked at his men, and they all laughed. "What's your word worth, lady?" Eliza raised the rifle, smooth and fast, and leveled it directly at Cutter's chest. The laughter died. "My word is worth more than your life," Eliza said quietly. "So I suggest you take it." The saloon went so silent Jack could hear his own heartbeat. Cutter stared at Eliza, his eyes narrowed. Then, slowly, he smiled again. "You got spine, lady. I'll give you that." He sat back down. "1 month, but if you ain't got my money by then, I'm coming for both of you. Understood?" "Understood," Eliza said. She lowered the rifle, turned, and walked out of the saloon. Jack stood frozen for another heartbeat, staring at the woman he'd married. Then he followed her into the street, his mind reeling. The crowd outside parted as they walked past. No one spoke. No one laughed. They walked all the way home in silence, and it wasn't until they were inside with the door closed that Jack finally found his voice. "What the hell were you thinking?" Eliza set the rifle down carefully and turned to face him. "I was thinking they were going to kill you." "So you walked into a room full of armed men and pointed a gun at their leader?" Jack's voice rose. "You could have gotten us both killed." "But I didn't." Eliza's calm was infuriating. "I bought us time." "Time to do what?" Jack threw his hands up. "We don't have $250. We don't have $50. How are we supposed to—" "We'll figure it out," Eliza said. Jack stared at her. "You're serious?" "Yes." "Eliza, this isn't one of your plans. You can't just will money into existence." "No," Eliza agreed. "But I can work for it. So can you. We have a month. That's enough time if we're smart about it." Jack shook his head, exhausted and overwhelmed. "Why did you do that? Why did you put yourself in danger for me?" Eliza looked at him for a long moment. Then she said simply, "Because you're my husband, and that means something to me, even if it doesn't mean anything to you." She turned and went to the bed, leaving Jack standing in the middle of the room with the weight of her words pressing down on his chest. And for the first time since that humiliating day in the street, Jack Wilder realized something that terrified him more than Cutter Kane or Dutch Kellerman or any outlaw he'd ever faced. He was starting to care about her, really care, and that changed everything. Jack didn't sleep that night. He lay on his bedroll, staring at the ceiling, listening to Eliza's quiet breathing from across the room, and tried to make sense of what had happened. She'd walked into that saloon like she owned it, faced down 5 armed men without flinching, and bought them time they had no business asking for. And she'd done it all for him, a man who'd made it clear he resented every day of their marriage. The guilt sat heavy in his chest, mixing with something else he couldn't quite name. Respect, maybe, or fear. Because if Eliza Moore could face down Cutter Kane without breaking a sweat, what else was she capable of? When dawn broke, Jack was already up, boiling coffee over the fire. Eliza emerged from the bedroom section of their single room, her hair loose around her shoulders for once, and stopped when she saw him. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep." Jack poured 2 cups and handed her one. "We need to talk about last night." Eliza took the cup but didn't drink. "What about it?" "What you did was dangerous, foolish. You could have—" "I know what I could have done," Eliza interrupted quietly, "but I also know what would have happened if I'd stayed home. They would have killed you, Jack, right there in the street, and I couldn't let that happen." Jack set his cup down hard enough to slosh coffee onto the table. "Why not? You didn't want this marriage. You said so yourself. I'm just the man they forced on you." Eliza's eyes flashed. "You think I would stand by and watch someone die just because our marriage started badly? What kind of person do you think I am?" "I don't know," Jack said honestly. "I thought I did. I thought you were quiet and meek and content to just exist in the background. But then you walked into that saloon with a rifle and stared down 5 killers without blinking, and now I don't know what to think." Eliza was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. "People see what they expect to see, Jack. You expected a frightened girl who'd accept whatever life handed her, so that's what you saw. And what are you really?" Eliza met his eyes. "Someone who's tired of being invisible." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Jack thought about all the times he'd watched her work in the garden, cooking meals, mending clothes, doing everything necessary to keep their small household running, and realized he'd never once asked her what she wanted, what she dreamed about, who she was beneath the quiet exterior. "I'm sorry," he said, "for not seeing you." Eliza's expression softened. "You're seeing me now. That's what matters." Jack picked up his coffee cup again, turning it in his hands. "We still have a problem. $250 in 1 month. That's more money than I've made in 6 months combined." "Then we'll find another way." Eliza sat down across from him. "I can take in sewing, mending, alterations, anything people need. You can take extra work at the lumberyard, maybe find something else on top of that." "That won't be enough." "Then we'll sell what we have. The furniture, my mother's dishes, whatever brings money." Jack shook his head. "Still not enough. And I won't let you sell your mother's things. They're all you have left of her." Eliza reached across the table and took his hand. Her palm was warm against his, calloused from work but steady. "Then we'll think of something else," she said. "Together." That single word, together, did something to Jack's chest, made it tight and warm and uncomfortable in a way he couldn't explain. He looked down at their joined hands and realized this was the first time they'd touched deliberately, without accident or necessity. It felt significant, like crossing a line neither of them could uncross. "All right," he said quietly. "Together." Word of what happened at the Silver Dollar spread through Redstone Hollow like wildfire. By noon, everyone knew that Eliza Wilder had faced down Cutter Kane and his gang with nothing but her father's old rifle and a spine made of steel. The story grew with each telling. Some said she'd held the rifle to Cutter's head. Others claimed she'd shot a whiskey bottle off the bar to prove she meant business. Jack heard the whispers as he worked at the lumberyard that morning. Men who'd never given him the time of day suddenly wanted to talk about his wife, their voices full of newfound respect. "That woman of yours got real sand, Wilder," Tom Fletcher said, as they loaded timber onto a wagon. Tom was a big man with hands like hammers and a reputation for not suffering fools. "Most women would have hit it home. She walked right into the lion's den." "She did," Jack agreed, still not quite believing it himself. "You know how to handle a gun, but does she really know how to shoot that rifle? Or was she bluffing?" Jack thought about the calm certainty in Eliza's eyes when she'd raised the rifle, the practiced ease with which she'd held it. "I think she knows." Tom grunted approval. "Well, Kane's gang won't wait forever. You got a plan for getting that money?" Jack didn't answer, because the truth was, he didn't. He worked through lunch, pushing his body until his muscles burned, trying to outrun the fear that sat cold in his gut. $250. It might as well have been $2,000. Even working double shifts at the lumberyard, even if Eliza took in every sewing job in town, they'd never make it in time. When he got home that evening, he found Eliza at the table surrounded by fabric scraps and thread. She'd spent the day going door to door offering her services. Now she was working on her first commission, mending a torn dress for the banker's wife. "How much did she pay?" Jack asked, setting down his hat. 50 cents. And she said she'd recommend me to her friends. Eliza didn't look up from her stitching. "It's a start." Jack did the math in his head. 50 cents. They'd need 500 more jobs like this, in 30 days. Eliza, "I know," she said quietly. "It's not enough, but I have to try." Jack crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. Up close, he could see the shadows under her eyes, the tension in her jaw. She was scared, just as scared as he was. She was just better at hiding it. "What you did last night," Jack said. "Standing up to Kane. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." Eliza finally looked at him. "I was terrified." "You didn't show it. My father used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite it." She set down her needle. "I was so afraid, Jack. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it. But I knew if I didn't do something, they'd kill you. And I couldn't let that happen." "Why?" Jack asked, his voice rough. "Why risk yourself for me?" Eliza touched his face, her fingertips gentle against his cheek. "Because somewhere between that horrible day in the street and now, you became more than just my husband in name. You became someone I care about." Jack's breath caught. He covered her hand with his own, holding it against his face. "I care about you too," he said. More than I thought I could. More than I wanted to. Why didn't you want to? Because caring about someone means you can lose them. Jack's voice dropped to barely a whisper. And I've lost enough. Eliza leaned forward until their foreheads touched. We're not lost yet. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, holding on to each other like drowning people clutching driftwood. And for the first time since Cutter Kane rode into town, Jack felt something other than fear. He felt hope. But hope didn't pay debts. Over the next 2 weeks, Jack worked every hour he could find. He took double shifts at the lumberyard, hauled freight for the general store, mucked stables at the livery, and did odd jobs for anyone willing to pay. Eliza sewed until her fingers bled, taking in mending and alterations and making shirts for miners who had money but no patience for needlework. At night, they counted their earnings at the kitchen table, watching the small pile of coins and bills grow with agonizing slowness. By the end of the first week, they had $18. By the end of the second, $32. Not nearly enough. Jack could feel the deadline approaching like a noose tightening around his neck. He stopped sleeping more than a few hours a night, stopped eating properly. Eliza tried to make him rest, tried to convince him to slow down before he worked himself to death, but he couldn't stop. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Cutter Kane's scarred face and cold smile. One evening, Jack came home to find Dutch Kellerman sitting at their table like he owned the place. Eliza stood by the stove, her face pale, her hands clenched in her apron. Jack's hand went to his gun before he'd even thought about it. Easy, Wilder. Dutch held up both hands, showing they were empty. I come in peace. Get out of my house, Jack said, his voice flat and dangerous. Now, is that any way to treat a guest? Dutch smiled that same infuriating smile he always wore, especially one who's here to help. We don't want your help. You sure about that? Dutch pulled a leather pouch from his coat and set it on the table. It landed with the heavy clink of coins. That's $200, more than enough to pay off Kane and have some left over. Jack stared at the pouch like it was a rattlesnake. What's the price? Smart man, there's always a price. Dutch leaned back in his chair. I want another year. You work for me, do what I tell you, and that money is yours. Plus, I'll forgive the debt you already owe. I don't owe you anything, Jack said through clenched teeth. Don't you? Dutch's smile widened. You lost everything to me in that poker game, Wilder. Your horse, your guns, your freedom. You think 1 year of playing house with a pretty wife makes us even? You think working at the lumberyard for pennies pays back what you owe? Jack felt rage building in his chest, hot and familiar. He wanted to drag Dutch out of that chair and beat him bloody. Wanted to take that smug smile and shove it down his throat. But before he could move, Eliza spoke. No! Both men turned to look at her. She'd moved away from the stove and now stood with her arms crossed, her chin lifted in defiance. We don't want your money, Mr. Kellerman, she said quietly. We'll find our own way. Dutch laughed. Lady, you got sand, I'll give you that. But sand don't pay debts. You really think you and your husband can scrape together enough money to satisfy Kane? He's not a patient man. When that deadline comes and you don't have his money, he's going to start shooting, and he won't stop with your husband. Eliza's face went paler, but she didn't back down. That's our problem, not yours. It'll be your funeral, too. Dutch stood, leaving the money pouch on the table. Offer stands until the end of the week. After that, you're on your own. He walked to the door, then paused and looked back at Jack. You know what your problem is, Wilder? You think pride is worth more than survival. But pride don't stop bullets. He left, closing the door behind him with deliberate gentleness. Jack stared at the money pouch sitting on their table like a curse. $200. Enough to save both their lives. All it would cost was another year of servitude to Dutch Kellerman, another year of being someone's dog. Jack, Eliza's voice was soft. Don't even think about it. Why not? Jack turned to face her. You heard him. Kane won't just kill me. He'll kill you, too. Is my pride really worth your life? Yes, Eliza said simply. Because if you take that money, if you give Dutch another year of your life, it will destroy you. I can see it in your eyes. You hate him. You hate what he did to you, what he turned you into. If you go back to him now, you'll never be free. And I'd rather die than watch that happen. Jack crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed her shoulders. Don't say that. Don't you dare say that. Then don't you dare give up. Eliza's eyes blazed with fierce determination. We have 2 more weeks. That's enough time. We'll find a way. How? Jack's voice cracked. Tell me how, because I can't see it. Eliza pulled away from him and picked up her father's rifle from where it leaned against the wall. She checked the chamber, her movements practiced and sure. I'll show you, she said. The next morning, Eliza woke Jack before dawn and told him to bring his gun. She wouldn't explain why, just handed him coffee and cornbread and waited by the door until he was ready. They walked out into the desert as the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Eliza led him to a wide clearing about a mile from town, where ancient Joshua trees stood like sentinels and the ground was hard-packed and empty. What are we doing here? Jack asked. Eliza set a row of tin cans on a fallen log about 30 yards away. Then she walked back to where Jack stood and raised her rifle. I'm showing you something. She sighted down the barrel, took a breath, and fired. The first can exploded, spinning off the log in a spray of metal. She fired again and again and again. 5 shots, 5 cans, every one dead center. Jack stared at her. Where did you learn to shoot like that? My father taught me. Eliza lowered the rifle. After my mother died, he was afraid to leave me alone, afraid someone would try to take advantage. So he taught me to protect myself. She reloaded with quick, efficient movements. I'm not just a good shot, Jack. I'm better than good. Jack's mind was racing. How much better? Set up some targets. I'll show you. Over the next hour, Jack set up increasingly difficult targets, smaller cans at longer distances, bottles hanging from tree branches that swayed in the wind, playing cards pinned to a wooden post. Eliza hit every single one. She could shoot from the hip, from the shoulder, left-handed and right-handed. She could hit moving targets and targets partially concealed behind cover. She was, without question, one of the finest shooters Jack had ever seen. Why didn't you tell me? He asked when she'd finished demonstrating. You never asked. Eliza cleaned her rifle with careful attention. And I didn't think it mattered. Until now. Jack was starting to understand. You want to enter the shooting competition. Every year, Redstone Hollow held a shooting contest during the 4th of July celebration. The entry fee was $2 and the prize was $100, enough to make a real dent in what they owed Kane. But the competition was fierce, drawing shooters from all over the territory, and it was only open to men. I can't enter, Eliza said. But you can. Jack shook his head. I'm good, but I'm not that good. I've seen the men who compete. They're professionals. Then I'll teach you. Eliza's voice was firm. We have 2 weeks. That's enough time if you practice every day. Eliza. Jack, listen to me. She grabbed his arm. This is our chance, the only real chance we have. If you can win that competition, we'll have enough money to pay Kane what we owe and still have something left. But you have to trust me, and you have to let me help you. Jack looked at her. At the determination in her eyes, the set of her jaw, the way she held herself like she was ready to fight the whole world if necessary. And he realized she'd been fighting her whole life, fighting to be seen, to be heard, to matter, and now she was fighting for him, for them. All right, he said, teach me. For the next 13 days, Jack and Eliza woke before dawn and walked out to the desert clearing. Eliza drilled him relentlessly, teaching him everything her father had taught her and everything she'd learned on her own. She taught him to control his breathing, to feel the rhythm of his heartbeat and fire between beats. She taught him to compensate for wind and distance and the way light could make a target look closer or farther than it really was. Jack was a natural talent, but Eliza was a master. Under her instruction, his accuracy improved dramatically. By the end of the first week, he was hitting 8 out of 10 targets. By the end of the second, he was hitting 9 out of 10. But there were shooters in the territory who could hit 10 out of 10 every time. It's not enough, Jack said on the morning of July 3rd, watching his shot go wide of a distant target. I'm good, but I'm not good enough to win. Eliza studied him for a long moment. Then she said, You're right, you're not. Jack felt his stomach drop. Then what do we do? We cheat. Jack stared at her. What? Eliza's expression was calm, but her eyes held that familiar steel. Not really cheat, but we use what we have. You're good at reading people, Jack. You told me once you could tell when someone was bluffing in cards just by watching their face. Use that. Watch the other shooters, learn their patterns, figure out who's dangerous and who's just lucky. And when the time comes, you do what you do best. You play the game better than anyone else. Jack felt a slow smile spreading across his face. You're telling me to use psychology to win a shooting contest? I'm telling you to use every advantage you have. Eliza handed him his gun. Now shoot. We still have work to do. The 4th of July dawned hot and cloudless. Perfect weather for the competition. The whole town turned out for the celebration, filling the main street with music and food and laughter. But Jack barely noticed any of it. He was too focused on the shooting range that had been set up at the edge of town, where 10 men stood checking their weapons and sizing up the competition. Jack recognized most of them. Tom Fletcher from the lumberyard, Samuel Brooks the blacksmith, a couple of ranch hands from Dutch's Spread, and 3 strangers who'd ridden in the night before, professional shooters, by the look of them, with custom rifles and the kind of confidence that came from winning contests like this before. The rules were simple. 10 targets at increasing distances, 1 shot per target, highest score 1. In case of a tie, there would be a sudden death round. Jack paid his $2 entry fee and took his place at the firing line. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. He could feel Eliza watching from the crowd, her presence like a warm hand on his shoulder. The first round was easy, large targets at 30 yards. Every man hit their mark. The second round was harder, smaller targets at 50 yards. 2 men missed. The third round eliminated 3 more. By the 5th round, only 4 men remained: Jack, Tom Fletcher, and 2 of the professional shooters. Jack did exactly what Eliza had told him to do. He watched the other men, studied their patterns. Tom favored speed over accuracy. The first professional was technically perfect, but crumbled under pressure. The second professional was the real threat, a lean man with gray in his beard and eyes that never blinked. The 6th round came down to Jack and the gray-bearded shooter. The target was a playing card, the ace of spades, pinned to a post at 75 yards. The shooter went first. He took his time, breathing slowly, adjusting for the slight breeze that had kicked up. When he fired, the crowd gasped. The bullet had torn through the center of the ace, dead perfect. Jack stepped up to the line. He could feel 100 eyes on him, could hear the murmur of the crowd. Someone said something about the gambler trying to win money the honest way for once. Someone else laughed. Jack blocked it all out. He thought about Eliza facing down Cutter Kane without flinching. Thought about her standing in the desert dawn teaching him to shoot. Thought about the way she'd said, "We're not lost yet," like it was a promise she intended to keep. He raised his gun, found the target, and fired. The bullet punched through the playing card half an inch from center. The crowd went wild. Sheriff Hodge stepped forward with a leather pouch full of coins and handed it to Jack with a grudging nod of respect. "Well shot, Wilder. Didn't think you had it in you." Jack took the money and immediately went to find Eliza. She was waiting at the edge of the crowd, her face glowing with pride and relief. "You did it," she said. "We did it." Jack pulled her into his arms, not caring who saw. "We did it together." Eliza hugged him back, her face pressed against his chest. "Now we can pay Kane. Now we can breathe." Jack pulled back just enough to look at her face. "You saved us, Eliza. Your idea, your training. This is all you." "No," Eliza said softly. "This is us." And standing there in the middle of the celebration with his wife in his arms and hope in his heart for the first time in months, Jack Wilder realized something that should have terrified him, but somehow didn't. He was falling in love with her. The realization should have sent Jack running, should have made him pull away, put distance between himself and the woman who'd somehow slipped past every defense he'd built. But he didn't run. He stood there in the middle of the celebration holding Eliza close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, and let himself acknowledge what had been growing between them since the day she'd walked into that saloon with a rifle and steel in her spine. They walked home together through the dusty streets, the leather pouch heavy with coins tucked inside Jack's jacket. People called out congratulations as they passed, And for once, the attention didn't feel like mockery. It felt real, earned. "We need to count it," Eliza said when they reached the house. "Make sure it's enough." Jack emptied the pouch onto their table, and they counted together, their fingers brushing as they sorted coins and bills into neat piles. $100 from the competition, $38.70 from their combined work over the past 2 weeks. They were still short, but not by much. "We need another $111, Jack said, doing the math again just to be sure. "We've got 6 days. Eliza's face was tight with concentration. "We can sell things, the furniture, my mother's dishes, if we have to." "No," Jack's voice was firm. "We're not selling your mother's things." "Jack, we don't have a choice. There's always a choice." Jack stood and paced the small room, his mind working through possibilities. "I still have my gun. It's worth something. And there's the horse Dutch took from me. If I can prove it was mine before the game, I might be able to claim it back." Eliza shook her head. "Dutch will never give up that horse. And your gun won't fetch more than $20. Jack knew she was right, but he couldn't just sit here and watch her sacrifice the last remnants of her mother's memory. He was still searching for answers when someone knocked on their door. It was Mary Callahan from the Silver Dollar Saloon. She was a handsome woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that had kept her saloon running smoothly for 15 years. Jack had known her since he first drifted into Redstone Hollow, and she'd always treated him fairly, even when others hadn't. "Mary," Jack said, surprised. "What brings you out here?" "Business." Mary glanced past him to where Eliza stood by the table. "May I come in?" They made room for her, and Mary settled into one of their 2 chairs with the air of someone who'd walked a long way to say something important. "I heard about what happened with Cutter Kane," Mary said without preamble. "And I heard about the deal he gave you. 1 month to come up with his money or face the consequences." "Word travels fast," Jack said carefully. "Always does in a small town." Mary's eyes moved to the money on the table, then back to Jack's face. "I also heard you won the shooting competition today. Congratulations. That was well done." "Thank you." Mary leaned forward, her expression serious. "But you're still short, and I'm guessing you're running out of ideas on how to make up the difference." Jack exchanged a glance with Eliza. "We'll figure it out." "I'm sure you will, but I'm here to make you an offer that might help." Mary pulled a folded paper from her pocket and set it on the table. "I need security at the saloon. Someone I can trust to keep order, stop fights before they start, make sure customers pay their tabs. The job pays $15 a week. If you want it, it's yours." Jack stared at the paper. $15 a week was more than he made at the lumberyard. It was also more than he deserved, and they both knew it. "Why?" he asked. "Why offer this to me?" Mary's expression softened slightly. "Because I've watched you these past few months, Jack. Watched you work yourself half to death trying to be something other than what you were. And I've seen the way you treat your wife, like she matters, like she's more than just the punishment everyone said she was." She paused. "The man who walked into my saloon 3 months ago wouldn't have fought so hard to pay an honest debt. He would have run. But you're not running. That tells me something." Jack felt his throat tighten. "I appreciate the offer, Mary, but I've caused enough trouble at your saloon. You really want me working there?" "I want someone who understands how gamblers think, someone who can spot a cheat before the shooting starts." Mary stood. "Think about it. Let me know by tomorrow." After she left, Jack and Eliza sat in silence for a long moment. "You should take it," Eliza said finally. "It's not enough. Even with that job, we won't make the deadline." Eliza reached across the table and took his hand. "Then we'll find something else to sell, or I'll take in more sewing, or we could ask Dutch for help." The words came out before Jack could stop them. Eliza's face went pale. "No," she said flatly. "Eliza, listen. No." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "We're not taking money from that man. We're not giving him more power over our lives." "Even if it means we die?" "Yes," Eliza's voice cracked. "Because at least we'd die free. At least we'd die together, not as his servants." Jack stood and crossed to her, taking her shoulders gently. "I don't want to die, and I don't want to watch you die because of my mistakes. This isn't just your mistake anymore, Jack. It's our life, our choice, and I'm choosing to fight for what we've built, not surrender it to a man who sees us as property. Tears were streaming down her face now, though her voice remained steady. Please, trust me. We'll find another way. Jack pulled her close, holding her as she cried into his chest. He wanted to believe her, wanted to think that determination and hard work would be enough. But he'd lived long enough to know that sometimes, no matter how hard you fought, the world just ground you down. Still, he'd promised to face this together, and he wouldn't break that promise now. All right, he whispered into her hair. We'll find another way. Jack took Mary's job the next morning. He worked at the lumberyard during the day and the saloon at night, sleeping only a few hours between shifts. Eliza continued taking in sewing, working by lamplight until her eyes burned and her fingers cramped. They were running themselves ragged, but the money kept adding up. Slowly, painfully. Not fast enough. With 4 days left until the deadline, they had $183. Still $67 short. Jack was walking home from the saloon late one night when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to find Billy Crow following him, Dutch's young ranch hand who'd called him out in the street weeks before. Wilder, Billy said, his voice nervous. Got a minute? Jack was too tired to fight. What do you want, Billy? Billy glanced around as if checking for listeners, then stepped closer. I heard about your trouble with Kane. Heard you're trying to scrape together money to pay him off. What's it to you? Nothing, except... Billy hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket, a small leather pouch. I got $60 here. It's yours if you want it. Jack stared at the pouch like it was a snake. Why would you give me money? Because Dutch is going to offer you the same deal again tomorrow, and I know you're desperate enough now that you might take it. Billy's young face was serious. I work for Dutch, but that don't mean I like what he does, the way he treats people, the way he broke you down just to prove he could. And you think $60 makes up for that? No, but it might keep you from selling yourself back into his service. Billy pressed the pouch into Jack's hands. Take it. You don't owe me nothing. Just promise me one thing. What? Promise me you'll stay free, that you won't let him own you again. Jack looked at the young man's earnest face and felt something shift in his chest. Billy Crow was barely 20 years old, working for a man he didn't respect, trying to do one decent thing in a world that didn't reward decency. I can't take this, Jack said, trying to hand the pouch back. You can and you will. Billy stepped away, his hands up. I got no family, no debts, nothing tying me down. I can leave this town tomorrow and start fresh somewhere else. But you got a wife who loves you and a life worth fighting for. Don't throw it away because of pride. Before Jack could respond, Billy turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. Jack stood alone in the street, the weight of $60 in his hand feeling heavier than gold. When he got home, Eliza was asleep at the table, her head pillowed on her arms, surrounded by half-finished sewing. Jack set the money pouch down carefully and gently shook her awake. Come on, he said softly. Let's get you to bed. Eliza blinked up at him, confused and exhausted. What time is it? Late. Too late for you to be working. He helped her to the narrow bed and pulled a blanket over her. She caught his hand before he could pull away. Stay, she whispered. Please. Jack hesitated. They'd been married for 3 months, but they'd never shared the bed. He'd always slept on the floor out of some misguided sense of propriety, some stubborn insistence on maintaining the fiction that this was a business arrangement rather than a real marriage. But that fiction had been dying for weeks now. And tonight, with the deadline looming and the weight of everything pressing down on them, Jack didn't have the strength to maintain it anymore. He kicked off his boots and lay down beside her, still fully clothed, leaving a careful space between them. But Eliza shifted closer, resting her head on his shoulder, and Jack found himself wrapping an arm around her, holding her close. Tell me we're going to be all right, she said quietly. Jack wanted to lie, wanted to promise her everything would work out, that they'd find a way to pay Kane and live happily ever after. But he'd spent too many years lying to too many people, and he couldn't lie to her. Not now. I don't know, he said honestly. But I know we'll face it together, whatever comes. Eliza was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I'm glad it was you. What? That day in the street, when they forced us to marry. I'm glad it was you and not someone else. She tilted her head back to look at him. I know you didn't want this, didn't want me, but somewhere along the way this became real. We became real. Jack looked down at her face, soft in the lamplight, and felt his heart clench. Yeah, he said quietly. We did. Jack? Yeah? I love you. The words hung in the air between them, simple and terrifying and true. Jack had heard those words before from other women in other places, but they'd never meant anything. They'd been tools, weapons, ways to get what someone wanted. But when Eliza said them, they carried weight. They carried truth. I love you too, Jack said, and felt something fundamental shift inside him, like a door he'd kept locked for years finally swinging open. Eliza smiled, and it transformed her entire face. Then she kissed him, gentle and sweet and full of promise. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for a few brief hours, the weight of their debt and the threat of Cutter Kane seemed very far away. Morning came too soon. Jack woke to find Eliza already up, standing by the table with her back to him. When she turned, her face was set with determination. I know how to get the rest of the money, she said. Jack sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. How? The rifle, my father's rifle. Eliza's voice was steady, but Jack could see the cost of the words in her eyes. It's worth at least $100. Maybe more. It was custom made, imported from back east. A collector would pay well for it. Jack stood and crossed to her. No, that rifle is all you have left of your father. It's a gun, Jack. Just metal and wood. It's not my father. It's not the memories. She took his hands. But our life together, that's real. That's worth saving. And I won't let us die because I was too sentimental to let go of an object. Jack wanted to argue, wanted to find another solution, but they were out of time and out of options. Still, the thought of Eliza giving up her father's rifle, the weapon that had saved Jack's life, that had bought them time, that represented everything strong and fierce about the woman he loved, felt like a defeat. There has to be another way, he said. There isn't. Eliza's voice was gentle but firm. We have $183 from our work, $60 from Billy. That's $243. We need $7 more, Jack, just 7. And the rifle will get us that and more. It will get us breathing room, maybe enough to save something for the future. She was right. She was always right, but that didn't make it easier. I'll talk to Samuel Brooks, Jack said finally. He collects guns. He'll give us a fair price. Eliza nodded, then picked up the rifle and held it for a moment, running her fingers along the smooth wood stock. Thank you, she whispered to it, for keeping me safe all these years, for teaching me strength. Then she handed it to Jack, and he saw tears in her eyes that she refused to let fall. Samuel Brooks examined the rifle with the reverence of a man who understood craftsmanship. He checked the action, sighted down the barrel, studied the inlay work on the stock. This is fine work, he said quietly. Very fine. Your father had good taste, Mrs. Wilder. He did, Eliza said. Samuel was quiet for a long moment, then set the rifle down carefully. I can give you $75 for this. It's worth more, probably $150 to the right buyer, but $75 is what I have on hand right now. It was more than enough, more than they needed. Jack started to accept when Samuel held up a hand, but I'm not buying it. Jack felt his stomach drop. What? I'm not buying it, Samuel repeated. I'm holding it. You come back in 6 months with $75 and I'll sell it back to you. Until then, I'll keep it safe. Clean it regular. Make sure it's ready for you when you're ready for it. He looked at Eliza. That rifle should stay in your family, ma'am. It's got history, got meaning, and I suspect you're going to need it again someday. Eliza's eyes filled with tears, but this time she let them fall. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. That's very kind. Ain't kindness, Samuel said gruffly. It's just right. He counted out $75 in bills and coins and handed them to Jack. You two are good people. Don't let Kane make you think otherwise. With 3 days left until the deadline, they had $318. more than enough to pay Kane and still have a cushion left over. That night, they sat at their table and counted it out one more time, just to be sure. "We did it," Eliza said, her voice full of wonder. "We actually did it." Jack pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "You did it. Your plan, your training, your sacrifice." "Our sacrifice," Eliza corrected. "Our victory." They celebrated with a simple meal and quiet conversation, and for the first time in weeks, Jack felt like he could breathe. The deadline was still coming, but now they were ready for it. Now they had the means to buy their freedom. But Jack had learned long ago that peace never lasted long. The next morning, Sheriff Hodge came to their door with news that turned Jack's blood to ice. "Kane's coming today," Hodge said without preamble. "Got word from one of the ranches south of here. He and his boys rode through yesterday heading this way. They'll be here by noon." Jack felt the world tilt. "He's a day early. Looks that way. Guess he wanted to catch you off guard, see if you'd run." Hodge shifted his weight uncomfortably. "I can't stop him from coming, Wilder, but I can make sure he doesn't start trouble in my town. I'll have deputies watching. You pay what you owe, and this ends peaceful." After Hodge left, Jack turned to find Eliza standing by the window, looking out at the desert. "He's testing us," she said quietly. "Coming early, hoping we'll panic." "Are you panicked?" Eliza turned to face him, and there was that steel again, that fierce determination that had kept them alive and fighting. "No. Are you?" Jack crossed to her and took her hands. "Not anymore. We have the money. We'll pay him what we owe, and then we'll be done with him forever. And if he doesn't honor the deal, then we fight." Eliza nodded slowly. "Then we fight. But then?" Cutter Kane rode into Redstone Hollow at 11:30 with his 4 men flanking him like a war party. They dismounted in front of the Silver Dollar Saloon and waited, making no move to go inside, making sure everyone in town saw them and understood the threat they represented. Jack and Eliza walked down the main street together, the leather pouch containing $318 tucked securely inside Jack's jacket. The whole town had turned out to watch, lining the streets and sidewalks, holding their breath for what would come next. Kane stepped forward when he saw them, that scarred face splitting into a cold smile. "Well, well, right on time, or close enough." His eyes moved from Jack to Eliza, lingering on her in a way that made Jack's jaw clench. "Brought your woman for protection again, Wilder?" "I brought my wife," Jack said evenly, "because we're partners in everything." Kane laughed. "Partners, that's sweet. You got my money, partner?" Jack pulled out the pouch and handed it to Kane. $250. Count it if you want." Kane opened the pouch and rifled through the contents, his smile fading slightly as he realized it was all there. He'd expected them to fail, expected to have an excuse for violence. "Looks like you managed to scrape it together after all," Kane said, tucking the pouch into his coat. "Color me impressed. I didn't think you had it in you." "We had it in us," Eliza said quietly. "We always did." Kane's eyes narrowed. "You got spine, lady. I'll give you that. But spine don't make you smart." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only they could hear. "See, the thing about debts is, there's always interest. The terms were $250 in 1 month, but you're a day late by my count, so that'll be another $25 for my trouble." Jack felt fury surge through him. "You came early. That's not my fault. Don't matter whose fault it is. You agreed to 1 month, and it's been 1 month and 1 day. So pay up, or we got a problem." The street went silent. Jack could feel everyone watching, could feel Eliza tense beside him. They had $68 left. They could pay Kane his $25 and still have enough to survive. But the principle of it, the injustice, made Jack want to draw his gun and settle this the old-fashioned way. Before he could speak, Eliza stepped forward. "You'll get your $25, she said. "But not today. We need time to—" Kane backhanded her. The blow was casual, almost lazy, but it sent Eliza stumbling back. Jack caught her before she fell, rage exploding through him like gunpowder. He drew his gun in one smooth motion and pressed it against Kane's forehead. The street erupted. Kane's men reached for their weapons. Sheriff Hodge and his deputies rushed forward. People scattered, clearing the line of fire. But Jack didn't fire. He stood there with his gun pressed against Kane's skull, his finger on the trigger, his whole body shaking with the effort of not pulling it. "Jack," Eliza's voice was soft behind him. "Don't." "He hit you," Jack said, his voice barely human. "I know, but if you kill him, they'll hang you. And I won't lose you. Not like this." Kane's smile had disappeared. His eyes had gone flat and cold. The eyes of a man who'd looked down the barrel of a gun many times before and survived. "Go ahead, Wilder," Kane said softly. "Pull that trigger. But know that if you do, my boys will cut down your wife before you can blink. And then they'll burn this whole town to the ground. Is that what you want?" Jack's hand shook. He wanted to do it. Wanted to feel the recoil, see Kane's blood spray across the dusty street. Wanted to end this man who'd threatened them, extorted them, and now struck the woman Jack loved. But Eliza was right. Killing Kane would only create more death, more suffering. Slowly, Jack lowered his gun. "We'll get you your $25, he said, his voice raw. "But you lay another hand on my wife, and I don't care how many men you have. I'll hunt you down and make you wish you'd never been born." Kane straightened his hat, his composure returning. 3 days. You got 3 days to bring me that money. And Wilder?" He leaned in close. "Next time, you better pull that trigger, because next time I see you hesitate, I'll know you're weak. And I eat weak men for breakfast." Kane and his men mounted up and rode out of town, leaving Jack and Eliza standing in the middle of the street surrounded by a crowd of stunned onlookers. Jack holstered his gun and turned to Eliza, gently touching the red mark blooming on her cheek. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Eliza's voice was steady, but he could see the tremor in her hands. "We need to find $25 more." "Eliza, 3 days, Jack. We have 3 days." She took his hand. "Let's go home." "Oh." They walked back through the silent town, and Jack felt the weight of every stare, every whispered judgment. But he also felt Eliza's hand in his, steady and sure, and knew that no matter what came next, they would face it the same way they'd faced everything else. Together. They sat in silence for a long time after they got home, neither of them speaking, both of them trying to process what had just happened. The red mark on Eliza's cheek had darkened to a bruise, and every time Jack looked at it, he felt rage surge through him again. "I should have killed him," Jack said finally. "Then you'd be dead too." Eliza pressed a cool cloth to her face, wincing slightly. "And I'd be alone. Is that what you want?" "I want him to pay for what he did to you." "He will, just not the way you're thinking." Eliza set down the cloth and met his eyes. "We're going to get that $25, pay him what he claims we owe, and then we're going to move on with our lives. We're not going to let him turn us into killers." Jack wanted to argue, but the calm certainty in her voice stopped him. She was right. She was always right. Killing Kane would solve nothing. It would only destroy everything they'd built. "How are we going to get $25 in 3 days?" Jack asked instead. Eliza was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she stood and went to the small shelf where she kept her mother's things. She picked up a delicate china teacup, one of the few items that had survived from her mother's collection. "No," Jack said immediately. "Not your mother's things." "It's just a cup, Jack." "It's not just a cup, it's all you have left of her." Jack crossed the room and took the cup from her hands, setting it carefully back on the shelf. "We'll find another way." "There is no other way. We've sold everything we can sell, worked every job we can find. This is all we have left." Jack looked at the shelf, at the few precious items Eliza had kept. The teacup, a small silver locket, a cameo brooch that had belonged to her grandmother. Each one was worth something, but together they might bring in $30 if they were lucky. "What if we didn't pay him?" Jack said suddenly. Eliza stared at him. "What?" "What if we just didn't pay? What if we told him to go to hell and dared him to do something about it?" "Jack, he'll kill us." "Maybe, or maybe he'll back down. He's got his $250. That's what I lost in the card game. The rest is just him being greedy. Maybe if we stand up to him, he'll realize we're not worth the trouble." Eliza shook her head slowly. "Or maybe he'll make an example of us. Show everyone else what happens when you don't pay what Cutter Kane says you owe." She took Jack's hands. I know you're angry. I'm angry too, but we can't fight him head on. We don't have the strength or the numbers. Then what do we do? Before Eliza could answer, there was a knock at the door. Jack opened it to find Mary Callahan standing on their doorstep, her face grim. May I come in? They made room for her, and Mary sat down heavily, looking older than she had just days before. I heard what happened in the street, she said. The whole town's talking about it, about how Kane struck you, Mrs. Wilder, and demanded more money. She paused. And I heard he's given you 3 days to pay. Word travels fast, Jack said bitterly. It always does. Mary pulled a small cloth bag from her pocket and set it on the table. There's $30 in there. It's yours. Jack and Eliza stared at the bag. Mary, we can't, Jack began. You can and you will. Mary's voice was firm. I've been running that saloon for 15 years, Jack. I've seen men like Kane before. They're bullies who prey on decent people because they can, and I'm tired of watching decent people get destroyed while the rest of us do nothing. But $30 is money I can spare and you can't. Mary stood. You've worked hard these past months, both of you. You've proven you're worth believing in. So take the money, pay off that bastard, and then get on with your lives. Eliza's eyes were bright with tears. Thank you, Mary. We'll pay you back. I promise. I know you will. Mary moved toward the door, then paused. And Mrs. Wilder? That was a brave thing you did, standing up to Kane in my saloon. Don't think I've forgotten it. After Mary left, Jack and Eliza looked at each other across the table. We have the money, Eliza said softly. We can pay him. Jack nodded, but something was bothering him. Something that had been nagging at the back of his mind since Kane rode into town. It won't end with this payment, he said. You know that, right? Men like Kane, they don't just walk away. Even if we pay him every dollar, he'll find another excuse to come back. Another debt we supposedly owe. He'll bleed us dry and then kill us anyway. Eliza was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Then we need to make sure this is the last time he comes back. How? I don't know yet, but we have 3 days to figure it out. They spent that night making plans. Jack wanted to gather the other townspeople, form a militia, drive Kane out by force. But Eliza pointed out that most of the men in Redstone Hollow were farmers and shopkeepers, not fighters. They'd be slaughtered. Then we leave, Jack said. Pack up everything we own and disappear. Start over somewhere Kane will never find us. And spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, always wondering when he'll show up? Eliza shook her head. That's not a life, Jack. That's just a slower death. Then what do you suggest? Eliza was quiet, staring at the oil lamp flickering on the table. Then she said, We make him leave us alone, permanently. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. You're talking about killing him. I'm talking about removing the threat. Whether that means killing him or making him decide we're not worth pursuing, either way, we need to act. Eliza met his eyes. You said it yourself. This won't end unless we end it. Jack had spent most of his adult life avoiding violence when he could. He'd been in fights, sure. He'd drawn his gun on men who needed killing, but he'd never planned a murder in cold blood, never sat down and calculated how to take another man's life. There has to be another way, he said. Then find it, because I'm out of ideas. They argued in circles for hours, neither of them willing to commit to violence, but neither of them able to see another path forward. By the time exhaustion forced them to bed, they were no closer to a solution. Jack lay awake long after Eliza fell asleep, staring at the ceiling and trying to find a way out of the trap Kane had set for them. And slowly, piece by piece, an idea began to form. The next morning, Jack went to find Sheriff Hodge. The lawman was in his office, cleaning his shotgun and looking like he hadn't slept any better than Jack had. Wilder, Hodge said when Jack walked in. Come to turn yourself in for threatening Kane? Come to make a deal. Jack sat down across from the sheriff. I'm going to pay Kane what I owe, all of it, but I want you there when I do it, you and your deputies, as witnesses. Hodge set down the shotgun. Why? Because Kane's going to try something. I can feel it. He's not the type to walk away clean. He'll take the money and then find another excuse to keep bleeding us. Jack leaned forward. But if you're there, if you see me pay him in full and hear him accept it, then you can testify that the debt is settled. If he comes back after that, you can arrest him for extortion. Hodge was quiet, considering. That might work, assuming Kane plays along. He will. He's greedy, but he's not stupid. He won't risk a legal fight with the law watching. And what's to stop him from just shooting you the moment you hand over the money? Nothing, Jack admitted. But I'm gambling he wants to walk away with the cash more than he wants revenge. Money's clean. Killing brings complications. Hodge studied Jack for a long moment. You've changed, Wilder. The man who rode into this town 6 months ago wouldn't have come to the law for help. He would have tried to handle it himself. The man who rode into this town 6 months ago didn't have anything worth protecting. Jack stood. Now I do. Hodge nodded slowly. All right, I'll be there, and I'll bring witnesses. But Wilder, if this goes bad, if shots get fired, you make sure your wife isn't in the line of fire. She's been through enough. She won't be there, Jack said. I'm not letting her anywhere near Kane again. But when Jack got home and told Eliza the plan, she immediately shook her head. I'm coming with you. No, you're not. It's too dangerous. Everything we've done has been dangerous, Jack. I'm not hiding now. Eliza's voice was firm. We started this together, and we'll finish it together. Jack wanted to argue, wanted to lock her in the house if he had to, but he knew it was pointless. Eliza had proven over and over that she was stronger than anyone gave her credit for. Trying to protect her by shutting her out would only insult that strength. Fine, he said, but you stay behind me, and if shooting starts, you run. Understood? Understood. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Jack cleaned his gun and checked his ammunition. Eliza sharpened a kitchen knife and tucked it into her boot, just in case. They didn't talk about what might happen if things went wrong. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said. That night, they lay in bed holding each other, memorizing the feel of being together in case tomorrow took that away. I love you, Eliza whispered in the darkness. I love you too, Jack said, more than I thought I could love anyone. If something happens tomorrow, nothing's going to happen. But if it does, Eliza propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. I want you to know that these past few months have been the happiest of my life, even with all the fear and the struggle and the danger, because I wasn't invisible anymore, because I mattered to someone. Jack reached up and touched her face, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheek where Kane's bruise had finally started to fade. You matter to me, he said, more than anything, and tomorrow we're going to pay that bastard, and then we're going to live the rest of our lives without looking over our shoulders. That's a promise. Eliza kissed him, deep and desperate, and they held each other until dawn broke over the desert. What? They met Kane at noon in the center of town, just like before. But this time Sheriff Hodge was there with 4 deputies, all armed and positioned strategically around the street. This time Mary Callahan stood on the saloon steps with Samuel Brooks and Tom Fletcher, making it clear the town was watching. This time Jack and Eliza weren't alone. Kane rode in with his 4 men, and Jack could see the calculation in the outlaw's eyes as he took in the changed dynamics. This wasn't going to be the easy intimidation he'd planned on. You bring my money, Wilder? Kane asked, dismounting. Jack pulled out the cloth bag containing $53. The 25 Kane claimed they owed plus 28 extra they'd scraped together as insurance. He handed it to Kane slowly, making sure everyone saw the exchange. Kane opened the bag and counted the money carefully. His scarred face showed no emotion, but Jack could see the disappointment in his eyes. He'd been hoping for an excuse to escalate, but the money was all there, and the law was watching. Looks like we're square, Kane said finally. More than square, Jack said. Sheriff Hodge, you're witnessing this? Cutter Kane has received full payment of the debt he claims I owe, including the extra $25 he demanded for coming a day early. I'm witnessing it, Hodge said loudly. Let the record show that Jack Wilder has paid his debt in full to Cutter Kane. As of this moment, there is no outstanding obligation between these 2 men. Kane's jaw tightened. He'd been outmaneuvered, and he knew it. If he came back demanding more money now, the law could act. He'd lost the leverage he'd been counting on. Pleasure doing business with you, Wilder, Kane said, his voice cold. He started to turn toward his horse, then stopped. One more thing. He moved faster than Jack expected, drawing his gun and firing in one smooth motion. But he wasn't aiming at Jack. He was aiming at Eliza. Time seemed to slow. Jack saw the gun come up, saw Kane's finger tighten on the trigger. He tried to move, tried to throw himself in front of Eliza, but he was too far away, too slow. The gunshot echoed across the desert, but Eliza didn't fall. Kane did. For a moment, Jack couldn't understand what had happened. Then he saw Eliza standing beside him, the kitchen knife in her hand still raised from the throw. The blade was buried in Kane's shoulder, and his shot had gone wild, the bullet kicking up dust 10 feet to the left. Kane staggered backward, blood spreading across his shirt. His men reached for their guns, but Sheriff Hodge and his deputies already had them covered. "Don't," Hodge said calmly. "Next man who draws gets buried today." Kane's men froze, their hands hovering near their weapons but not quite touching them. They looked at their leader, waiting for orders. Kane pulled the knife from his shoulder with a grunt of pain, blood running down his arm. He looked at Eliza with something like respect in his cold eyes. "You got steel in you, lady," he said through gritted teeth. "More than your husband." "My husband has more steel than you'll ever understand," Eliza said quietly. "He just knows when to use it and when to show mercy. You should learn the difference." Kane wrapped his bandana around his shoulder, stemming the blood flow. He looked at Jack, then at the sheriff, then at the crowd of townspeople watching from the sidewalks. "This ain't over," he said. "Yes, it is." Sheriff Hodge stepped forward, his shotgun still leveled at Kane's men. "You got your money. You tried to kill an innocent woman in front of a dozen witnesses. Now you got two choices. You can ride out of here and never come back, or you can stay and face charges for attempted murder. What's it gonna be?" Kane's eyes blazed with fury, but he wasn't stupid. He'd lost this round, and staying would only make things worse. He climbed onto his horse with difficulty, his wounded shoulder making the movement awkward. "Let's ride," he said to his men. They mounted up and turned their horses toward the edge of town. But before they left, Kane looked back at Jack and Eliza one last time. "You got lucky today," he called out. "But luck runs out eventually. Remember that." Then they were gone, disappearing into the desert in a cloud of dust and broken pride. The street erupted. People rushed forward, surrounding Jack and Eliza, offering congratulations and relief. Mary Callahan hugged Eliza, tears streaming down her face. Samuel Brooks shook Jack's hand so hard it hurt. Even Dutch Kellerman, watching from across the street, gave a grudging nod of acknowledgement, but Jack barely noticed any of it. He was too focused on Eliza, on the fact that she was alive and whole and standing beside him. "Where did you learn to throw a knife like that?" he asked when they finally had a moment alone. Eliza smiled, that small, mysterious smile he'd come to love. "My father taught me. Same time he taught me to shoot. He said a woman should know how to defend herself with whatever tools she had available." Jack pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she gasped. "You could have been killed. So could you. But we weren't." Eliza pulled back just enough to look at him. "We're still here. We're still together. That's all that matters." Sheriff Hodge approached them, his expression serious. "Kane's gone, but he meant what he said. He'll be back eventually. Men like him don't forget." "Then we'll deal with him when he comes," Jack said. "But we're not running. This is our home now." Hodge studied them both for a moment, then nodded. "You two have more courage than most men twice your size. This town's lucky to have you." As the crowd began to disperse and life slowly returned to normal, Jack and Eliza walked home through the dusty streets of Redstone Hollow. The sun was high and hot, but the burden they'd been carrying for months had finally lifted. They were free, truly free, for the first time since that humiliating day in the street when they'd been forced to marry. "What do we do now?" Eliza asked as they reached their small house. Jack looked at the garden she'd planted, stronger now, fuller, thriving despite the harsh conditions. He thought about the life they'd built together from nothing, about how they'd faced down outlaws and debt and their own fears and emerged stronger for it. "Now?" he said, pulling her close. "Now we live." 6 months later, Jack stood in Samuel Brooks' workshop, counting out $75 in carefully saved bills and coins. Samuel took the money without comment and disappeared into the back room, returning with Eliza's father's rifle wrapped in oiled cloth. "Kept it clean like I promised," Samuel said, handing it over. "Good as the day you brought it in." "Thank you, Samuel, for everything. You two earned it. You've become good people to have in this town." Samuel paused. "Heard you're building an addition onto your house. Room for a nursery, maybe?" Jack felt his face heat. "Word travels fast." "Always does." Samuel grinned. "Congratulations, both of you." Jack walked home through the late afternoon sun, the rifle secure under his arm. The town had changed in the past 6 months. New businesses had opened. New families had moved in. Redstone Hollow was growing, becoming something more than just a dusty way station for miners and drifters, and Jack and Eliza had grown with it. Jack had become head of security at the Silver Dollar, respected by the townspeople who once mocked him. Eliza had opened a small seamstress shop, her reputation for fine work bringing customers from surrounding towns. They'd saved enough money to buy their house outright from Harold Moore and started building the addition that would be a nursery by spring. Cutter Kane had never come back. Word was he'd died in a shootout in New Mexico, his luck finally running out just like he'd warned. Dutch Kellerman had left town too, selling his ranch to a cattleman from Colorado and disappearing into the territories. The shadow that had hung over Jack and Eliza's marriage was finally gone. When Jack reached home, he found Eliza in the garden, her belly just starting to show beneath her loose dress. She was planting new seeds, preparing for spring, humming that tuneless melody she always hummed when she thought no one was listening. "I brought something for you," Jack said. Eliza looked up, and when she saw the rifle, her whole face lit up. She set down her trowel and crossed to him, taking the weapon with reverent hands. "You got it back," she said softly. "We got it back. Together. Like everything else." Jack wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands resting on her belly, where their child grew. "Thank you." "For what?" "For saving me. Not just from Kane, but from myself. From the man I was becoming." Jack turned her around to face him. "That day in the street when they forced us to marry, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything, but I was wrong. I just found everything. I just didn't know it yet." Eliza's eyes shone with tears. "I thought the same thing. I thought being married to you would just be another kind of invisibility. But you saw me, Jack, really saw me, and that changed everything." They stood there in the golden afternoon light, holding each other in the garden that had grown from nothing, in the life they'd built from dust and determination, and a love that had surprised them both. Behind them, the small house they'd transformed into a home waited. Ahead of them, a future full of possibilities stretched out across the Arizona desert. And between them, a child who would grow up knowing that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to stand and fight when everything told you to run. "I love you," Jack said, the words coming as easily now as breathing. "I love you too," Eliza replied. "Forever." And in a town that had once witnessed their humiliation, Jack Wilder and Eliza Moore, now and forever Eliza Wilder, had found something that no poker game could win and no outlaw could steal. They'd found home. They'd found each other. And they'd found a love worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth living for every single day for the rest of their lives. The bet that had brought them together was long forgotten, but the choice they'd made to stay, to fight, to love, to build a life from the wreckage of their pasts, that choice would echo through generations. Their children would hear the story of the gambler and the quiet woman who faced down killers and conquered fear. Their grandchildren would walk past the garden that still grew behind the house, now tended by other hands but never forgotten. And on quiet nights when the desert wind blew through Redstone Hollow, old-timers would still tell the tale of Jack and Eliza Wilder, the couple who proved that sometimes the worst hands life deals, you can become the best things that ever happened, if you're brave enough to play them through. The sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and Jack and Eliza Wilder went inside their home together, closing the door on the past and opening themselves to whatever tomorrow would bring. Together, always together, forever.